Right, good evening, everybody. I am unique in the three speakers in that I am not a lawyer of any sorts. I am a teacher, which means I could keep you busy the whole night. Hopefully you're ready for that, and I'm going to be asking questions, especially the people sitting in the back row. And secondly, I don't represent anybody except myself. As you heard, I work at the University of Johannesburg. I definitely don't represent them here tonight. I am here in my private capacity. And actually, this is not something I envisioned myself doing ever. I'm not interested in politics, to be honest. And in a few minutes, I'll explain why I'm here. I basically have 5 parts to what I want to say. Now, most good sermons have 3 parts, I hope. But us as teachers need 5 because we usually have more to say. I'll start by just doing a bit of an introduction, and after that I've got a few background comments that I want to make to this whole conversation. And then I've got a few things to say about being an Afrikaner, which I apparently am, whatever that may mean. And then I've got a few things I want to ask you about the way forward. I've got a few thoughts on the way forward, and then I want to just close what I've got to say. Now, I want to make it very clear that I am not speaking for anybody except myself. I did have a really good chat with my wife last night, and I think I might be speaking for her too, to some degree. And my daughter, that's 2, will support me, I can assure you. But that's about it. Okay, so when I speak, whatever I say, my 2 colleagues who have spoken before might disagree with me vehemently, and I think that's part of the purpose of this conversation, to show diversity and to show that people think differently. So why listen to me then? I'm not representing anybody. Are you really interested in what Andre Van Zyl has to say? Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. So who am I? I think one can define yourself in a variety of different ways, and I think it's important to define yourself properly, because who you are says a lot about your basic assumptions and about your approaches to any issue. Now, you can define yourself according to identity. My name is Andre. My surname is Van Zyl. I am a Christian, I am a South African, I'm an Afrikaner, and as I said, I'm not quite sure what that means. I am a man standing in front of you. Or you can define yourself in terms of the roles that you play. I am a husband, I am a father, I am a son, I'm a brother, I am some people's boss, I'm some people's employee. And that list would probably get really long if I continued with that. But I'm standing in front of you today because I'm really, really, really passionate about this country and this continent and all of its people. And I think the one big lack, even that one, okay, mine, I think that's fantastic. To be honest, I don't think in the past 20 years we've learned to speak to each other and listen to each other. So when Johan asked me to be here tonight, I said yes, not because I had a specific need to be here, but because I thought it was really important that we spoke. And I'm going to share a few things that are on my mind and my heart, and hopefully that will provoke some conversation amongst us, because I think we need that as a country and as a continent. We need to start talking to each other, looking each other in the eye, listening to each other, really listening to each other, because that's the way we're going to go forward. So that's the first part. That's my introduction. If I can move on to some general remarks. I've got a few basic assumptions with which I start tonight, and most of these are informed by my background, by who I am, by my life experiences. The first thing I would like to say as a basic assumption is I assume that not all black people are alike, because I know that not all white people are alike. The fact that my skin is white does not give me as much in common as you think to other people who even sometimes speak the same language as I do. It doesn't give me as much in common with English white South Africans, or ones who would, I've got a friend who's married to a German woman. She's white, she's South African, but she's German. Okay, and there's a lot of diversity built into it, and just because my skin is white or yours is black or whatever color it may be tonight, if you were asked to classify it, I don't think that defines us at all. The second thing I want to take as a basic assumption is that I think emotional arguments in this country, which I like to call vuvuzela politics, takes us nowhere. Okay? It doesn't give us any progress. It's really nice, it's really loud, but it doesn't move us forward. And it happens on all sides. The next thing I would want to ask us as South Africans, and including me, in Afrikaans we've got this saying that if you're a sensitive person, that you have long toes. Okay? It's easy to step on your toes, in other words. Okay? They stick out far in front of you. I can say stuff and you're very sensitive. I think we need to all learn to not have long toes. We need to stop being as sensitive as we are. And we need to be able to listen to each other so that we can actually listen to each other. And then I think we need to get over the thing that complex problems have simple solutions. I think as South Africans, we often hope if we just do one thing right, one thing differently, it's going to fix it all. We're sitting with complex problems in this country. I often, for myself, thought up the analogy of a cancer patient who had a really serious tumor and who then had a big operation that for us happened in 1994. Now that patient is in the ICU. He or she has some serious life-threatening issues still to resolve. And if you think you can walk out of the hospital after that operation and be fine, you'll probably die. Okay? We need to take the issues we have as a nation seriously so that we can address them in appropriate ways. Ankie Kroch in Country of My Skull taught me that we have nowhere to go in terms of back. There is no good old days in this country. There has never been good old days. The only place for us to go is forward. And the only way for us to go forward is together. I am convinced that apartheid as a system, but also our past as a nation, harmed us in some really important ways. And I want to highlight a few that I think stand out. First thing I would want to mention is that we don't share a moral compass. As a matter of fact, we sometimes don't have a moral compass at all as a nation. We don't know what is right and wrong, and South Africans will do almost anything and nothing is sacred. That is not a good way to go. And as a nation, we need to figure out what is right and wrong and what we will do and will not do and what it means to be South African. The second harm it did us as a nation, in my view, is that it shallowed our public discourse. If you were too much of a thinker in the past, it got you into trouble, probably into prison. And our public discourse is really poor and really not very thoughtful, in my view. And we need to change that. We need to talk, and we need to talk sensibly and test ideas. Next, I don't think we know each other at all, and therefore we misunderstand each other as different South Africans quite often and quite easily. I also think we have a lot of unresolved hurt and anger in our nation, and that sits on all sides. And that unresolved anger and hurt often underlies a lot of what happens and goes wrong in our country. And then to a larger or lesser degree, every single South African is racialized in our thinking. We think in racial terms. It is so deep that we often don't even realize it. Okay, and I think we're going to have to face the fact that we are so racialized, and we're going to have to get ways of getting over that. And we're going to have to leave a bit of space for each other, because all of us are like that. And then lastly, I honestly think we don't really value ourselves as a nation or our diversity. I think we've got a low self-esteem as South Africans. And that often shows itself in arrogance, strangely enough, paradoxically. We shout louder, we do stuff more in a more exuberant way because we don't really believe that we are valuable and that we are as good as we think we are. Those are my general framing comments. I've got 6 minutes left, so I'm well underway, but I'm going to have to move along, so let me do that. I want to say a few things about being an Afrikaner. I'm an Afrikaner, apparently. And you'll see in a minute why I say apparently. I'm white, I'm a South African, and I'm Afrikaans. Now, I want to tell you a few things about Afrikaners from my perspective. But before I do that, I want to ask you to indulge me for a moment. I've got something to say about Jesus, and I'm not going to take in collection, and I'm not going to preach, so you can relax. But I have to say it because I identified myself as a Christian in the beginning. As a follower of Jesus, I would like to take one of the principles that he showed us so clearly, and I want to ask you to do that tonight. No matter what else you think of Jesus Christ, you will have to agree that he was an amazing person when he worked with other people. He withstood power and manipulation. He gave love to those who needed it, but they deserved it the least. He regularly saw right through people. He didn't look at the surface. He looked underneath the surface, and he saw what really made people tick and made them do certain things. Now, if I were to ask you, what have you got to say about Afrikaners tonight? What words come up in your mind? And I'm not going to ask you to respond because I only have 4.5 minutes left. But please quickly get a few words in your mind. Marianne and I thought of a few. In South African context, Afrikaners are often rich. They're often absent at any public event. You won't see them at any national event ever. Okay? They're very religious. They're critical. They're arrogant, seemingly. They are often racist or experienced as racist. They love cricket and rugby, but not always soccer enough. After 2010, I think that's improved. They love a braai. Okay? Now, I've just chosen a few things, and I'm very happy to be Afrikaans and to be recognized as an Afrikaner. But let me give you a few words about Afrikaners and Afrikaans that you might not know as well. And these are my own thoughts, and my two friends might disagree with some or all of what I'm going to say now. First thing you need to realize is that Afrikaners are newly rich. 100 years ago in this country, Afrikaans people were just through a war, the South African war. Their farms were burnt. They had nothing. Now, they stepped on a few people to get where they are today. But you know, newly rich people have specifically bad habits. And you'll notice many of those under Afrikaans people still. Okay? Because we're not used to money. We don't have old money, often. Afrikaners are selectively bred. But we are selectively bred to be hardy, contrary, and difficult. That's who we are. My ancestors came to this country from about 350 years ago to the last one came about 80 years ago. And if I can tell you about some of them, some came because of religious persecution in Europe. Some came for the adventure. My mother's father, my last ancestor who came to this country, came from the Netherlands just after the First World War in about 1919. And he came because there was no future for him in the Netherlands. He could not see a future. So he came to South Africa because there might be a future for him here. He was so poor when he arrived that when he got on the train from Cape Town to Pretoria area to try and find work, he saw somebody eating a tomato, and he had not seen a tomato in his life. He saw that red fruit and he thought, wow. And he asked, could I have one? And the guy gave him one. And it tasted so frank that he never ate tomatoes again for the rest of his life, the poor guy. Okay. We are all mixed race in that sense. There is no such thing as a pure Afrikaner. What would that even mean? I've got French, English, Dutch, and a few other bloods in me that I probably don't even know of. Okay. We are South African to a core. You cannot be an Afrikaner anywhere else. If you don't live in South Africa, you cannot be an Afrikaner. There is no second generation Afrikaner outside of this country. Okay? We are South African to the core. To some degree, we're confused and damaged. Don't for a moment think that apartheid didn't damage us. Our past didn't. You don't hurt other people and do bad things without it harming you too. The term Afrikaner is a new construct. 100 years ago, people thought of themselves as Transvaalers, Vrystaaters, people from the Cape or from Natal. They didn't think of themselves as one nation. It's a brand new construct. It's about 100 years old, really, as a true construct. It's not a bad thing, but you must realize that it's relatively new. We don't have leaders that speak for Afrikaners as a whole. There are none. Okay? As a matter of fact, it's very difficult to identify Afrikaner leaders who you could say that most Afrikaners respect and look up to. At the moment in this country, we are leaderless to a large extent. We don't have any political power. We have a sense of loss. Sometimes that sense of loss is ridiculous, but it's there, okay? And it's real. We have a sense of loss. We have a sense of guilt, but also a sense of frustration because we are hopeful and we're excited about this country, especially those of us who are happy to be here and love being here. But we're also frustrated that so many things haven't come to fruition that we would love to see happening for all of the people in this country. And I think as Afrikaner, I can tell you I've got a space in this country and I've got a role to play. And I love being part of it to try and play that role. What would I like to ask of you before my time runs out completely? The first thing I think I would want to ask of you, and that I think I want to ask of all South Africans, is that we start being on each other's side. I'm married, and the one rule my wife and I have is that we will never be in opposition. She's never my enemy. Because if we're on each other's side, then we can make it work. Because fundamentally in this country, we need relationships to work, and therefore we have to decide that each other's benefit is to all of our benefit. I am on your side, and you must be on mine, and on the one next to you and the other one. My time's up, but I'm going to try and quickly run through. I'm almost done. We need to decide that this country and its people is its has a future, and we're going to make that future happen. There are no quick fixes, so we better start listening to each other, and we better start talking to each other honestly. And really listening to each other, I think, is the tough part. We need to be long-suffering. We need to find a future together. And I can honestly tell you, I work in this country for a future, not for myself, but for my daughter. Because I don't think we're going to fix things quicker than that. I am hopeful for her, and I'm not desperate for myself. I love being part of the fight and part of the mix to try and make this place a much better place than it is at the moment. So please, if you're a black South African or whatever you would classify yourself, please find ways to teach us about who you are. We don't know you. I would love to know more. I have learned a huge amount from my black colleagues and friends. Please ask us questions too. Don't assume you know that who we are and why we do certain things. You probably don't, and you'll probably get it wrong. Please really listen to each other and to us, and we need to listen to you. Please stand for what is right. Figure out what is right and stand up for that. Okay? As South Africans, the one thing that really frustrates me and scares me for my daughter's sake is that we don't stand up for what is right in this country well enough. If something is right, we must be able to stand up for it. And then please address racism in your own circles first. It is time that white South Africans tell other white South Africans, you better stop being racist, and that is racist. But I want to say that to everybody else. Start speaking to people like you first. And let us all refrain from making the all whites are, all blacks are statements and blaming a specific group for all of our woes. We are all the same in so many ways, I would argue tonight, and we have all contributed to make this a sad place, but also a wonderful place. We have made it what it is today, and I think the problem of our country is not black or white or who's in government. I think Alexander Solzhenitsyn summed it up beautifully when he said, and this was his own experience in the Russian situation in Russia, gradually it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, not between classes, nor between political parties either. And for our purposes tonight, you can add, or through race, but right through every human heart and through all human hearts. This line shifts inside us. It oscillates with the years, and even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains an unuprooted small corner of evil. He continues to say the problem isn't solved by us getting rid of somebody. If it were only so simple, he says, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? So, in closing, I would like to thank the organizers of Real Talk for doing this. For those working behind the scenes and in front, I really value this, and I hope this is going to be something that grows. Thank you all for listening to me, and I look forward to chatting to you further. And I think I really want to say, as fellow South Africans, let's take this opportunity, not just the Real Talk one, but this, where we are now in our country, and let's move this country forward. I've used a lot of words tonight, and when you speak about important things, I can honestly tell you, I'm standing here thinking, what, did I say anything sensible that's even going to make a difference? Because when you speak about important things, then the weakness of words becomes so apparent. Then it becomes so apparent that you can't really say anything, and the more words you use, the more apparent that weakness becomes. So, let me learn from my 2-year-old daughter. And somebody else used the same phrase, but she has now gotten to the point where she can actually say the first line of the national anthem. I wish I could play it to you tonight. I'd be a proud dad. But let me end with what she would say, and that is Nkosi Sikelele Africa. Thank you.